Hey, runners only with Dom Harvey.
Runners only with Dom Harvey and Dean Lonergan. G'day, mate.
How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming over.
No problems. It's fair to say, haven't done too much running of late. You're looking like a Scandinavian racing sardine, and I'm looking like a fairly bloated humpback whale, maybe.
Oh, you're being too hard on yourself. What is First of all, thanks for coming over. I told some people you were coming over, and they said, "Oh, what's he selling or what's he promoting?" I said, "No, nothing. He just agreed to come over." Is that a reputation you have?
Oh, I'm assuming it is. By nature, I think I'm a salesman, and I sell stuff for a living. It's what I've been doing for the last sort of 30 or 40 years. And at the moment, we're in the business of selling boxing, and we're re-establishing ourselves back here in New Zealand. We've got some stuff coming up, but I'll talk about anything you want to talk about, Dom. This is your... You asked me over. I have no idea what the agenda is, so we'll just roll with it.
Well, there's no agenda. This is just basically to unpack your fascinating life. I've always found you a fascinating dude.
I promise you, it's not that fascinating, especially when you sit in the middle of it.
So, first of all, the podcast is called Runners Only. What is your relationship with running? Do you run at all?
Not anymore.
But
once upon a time, obviously, when I was a young fella, I aspired to be a professional football player, which I sort of managed to achieve on a semi-professional basis, and used to do quite a bit of, obviously, training, like predominantly short stuff, but, with the benefit of time and looking at the times when I achieved the most I did in sport, the longer distance was definitely the way to go to get a base. And the sport that we participate in now in boxing, we don't participate, but we organise. All boxers, if you want to be good, they have to get out and do the miles on the road in the morning, 5-6 miles or whatever that equates to in Ks, gives them a good base, running for 45 minutes to half hour. 45 minutes to an hour. And that provides a base for what they do. But yes, certainly a long time ago I used to do it. I get out and I walk, and I've got to get out and move more and walk more. I'm probably about 20 kilos overweight, so I've got 20 to lose, so I'm working on it.
So the distance you were talking about, that's probably the best part of like 10Ks. And I know like Tyson Fury and Joe Parker, those guys do that most mornings. And David Nikau, who is in Australia, in a similar location to where you've been, he's a demon, isn't he? He runs super fast.
He's an outstanding athlete. You just got to get his shirt off to see what a beast he is. And he's cut. He's very much in the. He could be a male model quite easily.
Yeah, ridiculously good looking.
And what I can't believe, I think he's about 6'3", 6'4", and he fights at cruiserweight, which is about 91.5 kilos. How he gets down to that weight is beyond me, because he is all muscle. So I can only imagine he's got fairly light bones for God knows what reason, and he must have reasonably skinny legs, because he's built like a brick shithouse up top. So and he is an exceptional boxer. He's going to be a great New Zealand talent.
Yeah, phenomenal. And you're back in New Zealand because the Fight for Life's coming back?
Oh, at some stage, I'm sure we'll be announcing that. But we come back here, we had a contract, Liam and my son, we run a company called DNL Events, which stands for Dean and Liam.
It's very clever.
It is very clever.
I never would have guessed it.
Short and to the point. I tell you what, when people are taking down your email addresses, you have to spell it out to them letter by letter by letter, because it's actually not that easy, strangely enough. And it looks like Dandel Events, but it's not. But we had a contract with Fox Sports, I think, for 7.5, 8 years, and unfortunately that come to a conclusion December 31. And so we've still got a stable of fantastic New Zealand boxers, and Andre Mikhailovich is one who's a middleweight. He's probably the greatest middleweight prospect this country's ever seen. We've got Jerome Pampalone, and they're both world-rated guys, and we're looking to do a deal and maybe put some stuff on with a young lady called Mia Motu, who is quite sensational. She's capable of fighting for a world title. So we've got some really great New Zealand talent, and we've currently got the only male world champion in Australia, a guy called Jai Pataya. And Jai is without doubt the toughest man I've seen in my entire life, and I would say he's probably the toughest combat sports athlete on the planet. He fought in a world title July 2 last year on the Gold Coast, and he fought the number one guy in the division, a guy called Maris Breedis. He broke his jaw. Jai broke his jaw in the first 2 rounds of the fight, so he had to fight 10 rounds with a broken jaw. But then, and I was right ringside when I saw this, he broke it on the second side in round 10. So his whole jaw for 2 rounds was literally flopping around in the breeze. And I saw him.
Can you imagine the intense agony every time you get even a light graze on that?
He couldn't talk afterwards. He was just in immense pain. But to be able to still walk forward like he was, taking shots on the chin, biting down on his jaw, and it was just flopping. He said it was like biting into a mouthful of marbles, and he couldn't hold the jaw together, but he still kept fighting.
I'd
Never seen anything like
God,
it.
I'd be so mad at my corner for not throwing the towel on.
Well,
I think I'd go over there and grab that towel myself. And
To be fair, Jai would have been gutted if they did that, because his go is, mate, this is what he does for a living. He's always wanted to be world champion. He got his chance, and he is the greatest advocate for how do you get over pain and adversity. This is a guy who had a broken hand for 5 years, so he's a southpaw, and his left hand's his power weapon. He couldn't fully land that because it was broken for 5 years, and he kept fighting and didn't tell anyone because he needed the money. This is a guy who probably started boxing age 8 or 10, went to the Olympics, was selected for the Olympics for Australia when he was 16, fought when he was 17, one of the youngest boxers to ever go to the Olympics. Got his chance at a world title, and nothing was going to take that chance away from him, no matter what. Broken jaw. He actually broke his ribs a month before the fight. And rib injuries, I don't know if you've ever had them, Dom, but
I've fractured one. It's excruciating.
they are excruciating. Well, it not only broke, it separated, crossed over another rib, and ripped all the rib cartilage off. And rib cartilages are the most painful injury you can ever have. And normally these things will take 2-3 months minimum. He was fighting 6 weeks later. He did the injury on a Thursday, had surgery on a Sunday, and about a week and a half later was back in nearly full training. His tolerance of pain is through the roof, and I can't... Everything you see on Conor McGregor on the outside and how angry and tough he looks, that's what Jai's got on the inside. And watch out for him. He's something very, very special.
Okay.
I've never seen anything like him, and Liam and myself think he's going to be something special.
Okay, now, this is the funny thing. This Jai guy that you mentioned and all those Kiwi fighters, hand on heart, I've never heard of any of them. But you and your son do such a phenomenal job, like, promoting these people. Like, you sort of made Joseph Parker a household name.
Well, we worked with Joseph.
Very closely.
All we did was provide him the platform, and Joe took advantage of it by doing what he did, which was win fights. The reason why you haven't heard a lot of Andre Mikhailovich and Miyamoto and Jerome Pampalone is simply because we've been over in Australia, and these guys have been fighting over there. So our job over the next 12 months is to blow these people up, because they are seriously world class. They're coached by a guy called Isaac Peach, who's a hardcore, heavily tattooed West Aucklander who lives out in West Auckland. But in my opinion, he's a bastion of world-class excellence. He really knows what he's doing when it comes to boxing. He's got a world champion, or he's got a guy called David Light's going to fight for a world championship, I think March 25 in England against Lawrence Okoli, who's a WBO world cruiserweight champion. He's got Miyamoto. He's got Andre Mikhailovich and Jerome Pampalone. Now, what's fascinating about all these fighters, he's had them all for about 4 years or more. None of them have lost yet. He is just an incredible boxing trainer, and I think you're going to see some big things out of him. And over the next sort of couple of years, you're going to start seeing New Zealand boxing, come to the fore again. Joe Parker's going to keep what Joe does. I think Joe's an exceptional talent, mate. I think he could go back to a heavyweight title at some stage. He's not that far away from it. Kiwis can be very critical if they don't see amazing performances every time someone steps out.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's
the tall poppy thing, isn't it?
It is a little bit, but you know what? The fact is that they care enough to have an opinion, and you'd rather have people who've got an opinion, good, bad, or otherwise, than people not having an opinion and not knowing who they are.
Yeah, that's true. Right, enough about other people. Let's talk about you, Dean Lonergan. So you became famous like in the late 1980s, early 90s, playing for the Kiwi League team.
Wouldn't quite say famous, but I was involved in. Back then, there was no social media. There was no fragmentation of media. I think there were only probably 3 or 4 TV channels going at the time. And the Kiwis played Australia, I think, in 1991 in Melbourne. We hadn't won against the Aussies for a long, long time. And they had one of the all-time great teams that had the likes of Steve Roach, I think Wally Lewis, and a number of other really high-profile players. And in 91, we went over there with a very unheralded young underdog side. I was part of that, along with Clayton Friend and Gary Freeman and Peter Brown and a whole lot of other guys, and we managed to pull off a win. And at the time, I got knocked out probably 10-15 minutes into the game. I was very.
Is this the one where you were like convulsing on the field?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was like a concussion, a head knock.
Yeah,
right.
It very much was. We
it might still be on YouTube if anyone wants to look it up, but it's sickening, right?
Well, it's not great. But I was very, very keen to put a big shot on Roach, because we'd played Stevie Roach and we'd played Balmain early in the new year, or early in the pre-season. Auckland Rugby League played Balmain, and I knew Roach was going to be in the side, so we had a bit of a fracas in that game, and I was very keen to put a big hit on him early on and, try and intimidate him. It was the dumbest thing I could have done because I ended up getting knocked out. He ended up with about 20 stitches in his head. I got knocked out and convulsed on the field. I got carried off and came back on a little bit later.
Yeah,
and that was sort of the incident that blew us up, and then I got a job on Radio Hauraki after that.
Right.
And
Wait. You are moving way too fast. Like this, we need to digest this somewhat. Like the podcast will be over in 4 minutes. So you get knocked out. It's sickening. I feel like this was a golden era for league, and it was a time where fights were still sort of encouraged, and if you squirted some water on your head and came back on the field, you were considered like heroic in a way.
That wasn't the reason behind it.
Right.
Pretty much as I was being dragged off, I could see George Mann, who I'd played with in the Auckland team, and I'd played against him in quite a few club competitions. George was warming up, and I just thought, man, I've fought too hard for you to have this spot, George. So as soon as I regained George ran on, and as soon as I regained my stuff, I said to Bob Bailey, who was the coach, I said, mate, I'm ready to go back on. That was 10 or 15 minutes later. So he threw me back on, and I've watched the game once, and I know
how do you feel when you watch it?
It's like watching somebody else.
Is it?
I don't really think about it. But I know when I come back on, I'm staggering all over the place. But we managed to get through the first. I don't remember much about the first half. We got through the game, and we won the game. And what's really interesting, right, is that you don't know what people are going to come into your life as a result of things like that. And Liam and myself have been working in Australia for the last 7 years. And the commentator who called that game was a guy called Pat Walsh. And Pat had gone on to be quite instrumental in Channel 7 in Brisbane and massive media contacts. So Pat has been incredibly... He remembered the game. He remembered me from that game. Pat Walsh has been, he's only just retired, incredibly helpful for us in terms of connections all around Australia, So it's just, and those sort of connections, they last for a very, very long time. So yeah, it's quite interesting where things end up and what you end up doing.
How many other times were you concussed?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
Right. Are you right now?
Yeah, I think so. My memory's not as good as it could be, but then again, most people...
Well, you're in your late 50s, so that's...
Yeah, well, I'm 57, so...
Right.
But, you look at guys overseas, in Australia in particular, and they've all got the fading memories. Like, I think the Ray Price has got some issues. I think Steve Mortimer's got some issues.
Did you just dodge a bullet, do you think?
Well, I finished quite young. So the game that I got knocked out, and I played one more test match after that, and I might have had another 5 or 6 games after that, then I finished up. So I was only 26 when I finished rugby league. And then I was lucky enough, I didn't think much of it at the time, but I was lucky enough to get a job on Radio Hauraki. And I got to tell you, Dom, you did 25 years plus on radio.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that, in my opinion, of all the media, of anything you can do, radio is the greatest job. Because, I wouldn't have done, I never took it as seriously as you did, as your career, right? And it was something I just stumbled into and just got lucky. But I got a job on Radio Hauraki. I used to do 6 to 9. I'd turn up at 5 to 6 and I'd leave at 9 o'clock. And we were paid pretty good money.
You were part of a very successful show called The Morning Pirates with, was it Mark Perry and Leah Parnapa?
Mark Perry and Leah Parnapa. We took, what happened was
what sort of music, was it a rock station then, or were you still...
Classic rock to the cutting edge. And mate, Hauraki at one stage, it was very, very popular in Auckland, way back before the days of the fragmentation you've got now, and you're all up and down the country, and it was very, very popular.
So how did that career come about? Like, were you just quite were you quite charismatic at aftermatch speeches and stuff, or you had a natural flair for?
No, I think what happened was I'd been on this show a couple of times because you had Phil Gifford and I can't remember the other girl's name, and Mark Perry was on the show. And then I'd been in the studio a couple of times because I was one of the local rugby league players, and when I got knocked out, obviously I was quite high profile, and I was in the media a lot for a very short space of time. But I ended up being quite good mates with some of the radio guys, Dan Boyle, who was in there, and Mike Regal, who was a program director. And when, for whatever reason, I think More FM come and poached Phil Gifford and I think it was Kathy at the time, and they took them down to Christchurch. So that's when Phil left. So all of a sudden there was a space. So they got me in for a few days to cover. A few days turned to a couple of weeks turned to a couple of months, and then a couple of months turned to, I think I did 7 years. So it was just luck.
Amazing. I feel like you get bored of things too. So 7 years for you is a long time.
You know what? I really enjoyed it. Radio's a lot of fun. And do I get bored with stuff? Some maybe, I don't know, but I did enjoy radio, and it's a great medium to be part of. And I tell you, the perfect place to do radio would be Sydney, London, or New York, where they get paid millions to do what they do.
Economies of scale.
Because it's the world's easiest job, and I know a lot of people, aspire to it, and they should do, and a lot of people are in there for their careers, get all nervous about it, and they do a lot of work, and that's fantastic. But I can only tell you how my experience, and compared to bloody working 12-hour shifts out at Coca-Cola, driving forklifts and packing loads, or being an offsider on trucks delivering Coca-Cola, and then I used to be a cleaner. So I used to run 3 jobs. Yeah, I used to run 3 jobs. So when I first left school, I went what you'd call to be an offsider on trucks. So you help people deliver soft drinks, right? Then I'd finish that and I'd come home and I was a cleaner at a school, at my school I used to go to school at. And then after that, I would be at rugby league. So effectively I had 3 jobs because I was getting paid for all 3 of them.
So was the money any good in rugby league at that time?
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah. So these jobs sort of like before you were a professional player?
Yeah. Like we were getting paid to play rugby league, and it's all relevant, right? Back then, I remember I bought my first house as an investment. It was like 75 grand. Well, at the time, I might have been making 50 or 60 grand a year before tax, so it's very easy to get into these things. And when I was a young fella, maybe 21, 22, I remember having 2 or 3 houses, so it was a lot. There's no doubt it was a lot easier back then compared to what you've seen now when average house prices are they're now coming back. But yeah, and the opportunity to buy in was a lot easier. Unfortunately, I was going to keep these houses and have 10 or 20 by the time I'm 57. Didn't quite work out that way.
Yeah, because I remember just when I sort of left school and started in radio, this would have been like 1990, I guess, early 90s, I'd come up to Auckland and stay with my friend Robert Scott, who's on the breeze now. And
because you guys were on 2XS together, right?
And
that must have been a great place to work, because I'm on social media. It's one of the great things about Facebook. Facebook friends with a few people, and I always see this 2XS stuff come up, and people say what a great time it was down in the Manawatu and Palmerston North.
Yeah, it was a breeding ground for like really quite good radio talent for some reason.
Yeah.
But I'd come up and stay with Robert, and he lived in Sarsfield Street, and he'd point out your house.
Really?
And I don't know if you were playing league at the time or maybe just started in radio, but it's like one of the most expensive streets in Auckland now. That house is probably worth 7 or 8 mil.
It probably is, and I wish I had kept the bloody thing. But yes, I was in Sarsfield Street. We were right down the bottom of it, and it was an amazing neighbourhood.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's a lot easier to get in it back then than what it is now. And I think, I paid about $500,000 for that place, whereas now it's like whatever it's worth. And at the time, it was a real stretch for me, and and I was being a wanker, to be honest, because we used to live in a place called Wanganui Ave, which is on the other side of Herne Bay, and I love Wanganui Ave, but that was sort of the southern slopes, and all the knobs were on the other side at the northern slopes. And in my stupidity as a young fella, I thought it was cool to be with all the knobs, but I should have stayed where we were. It was a lot less to get in there, and make great place to live.
So this is
We're talking Ponsonby, Herne Bay.
Yeah, Herne Bay, Freeman's Bay. So it was actually so close to where we are now in the podcast space. So were you married at the time? Have you ever been married?
No.
So you're a father of one, Liam, and one thing that strikes me about you from my relationship with you is just how much your relationship with your son means to you. And I'm talking way back when you used to work in the same building as me, and you'd come in, and Liam was a young fella at the time, and you'd always give him a shout out on the air, using his middle names, the whole lot.
So I've got a mate of mine, Leo Malloy, who's run for the Mayor of Auckland, always calls him LRD, which is Liam Robert Daniel, I always called him Liam Robert Daniel on here. So it's we got perfection on the first go. There's no need to have any more.
So Liam's mum and your ex, her name's Julie?
Julie it is.
Yeah, so you were never married?
No, we didn't marry, but we're still really good friends.
Yeah.
She's been an amazing mum, and, she's a good friend of mine. And she's married now, and I get on very, very well with her husband. So it's been while it's never ideal, it's been as good as it could be, I think.
When did you break up? When Liam was quite young?
Liam was only a young fella, maybe 1.
What happened? You want to talk about it?
No, not particularly.
Really?
It's not a period that I'm proud of. I made a complete dick of myself on a number of occasions. Yes.
Infidelity or?
Yes.
There's a lot of water under the bridge.
Oh, The answer is you're right.
Right.
And we all do stupid things
We
when
do.
we're younger.
You can't
if
hold that
if
much
I
guilt
had-
and shame. Quarter of a century later,
if I had my time again, you'd do things way differently. So yeah, it's not a proud period
Right.
of my life.
has she forgiven you though?
Oh yeah.
You need to forgive yourself.
Oh, I probably have. I just don't really want to talk about
Right,
it.
right. But you were famous at the time. You were young. You were successful. I suppose there was a lot of not excusing your behaviour, but
Here's
there
the
was a lot
deal.
of temptation.
It's really interesting you say famous, right? I don't care what anyone says. You can't be famous in New Zealand. There's 5 million people live here. A whole lot of people might recognise you when you go past. But I once spent some time with a guy called Mark Jackson. And Mark played in the AFL and he fought in one of my Fight for Lives. He was a real character. And he used to say, Dino, these people in Australia think they're fucking famous. They're not famous. Frank Sinatra was famous, and I hung out with Frank Sinatra in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like, Tom Cruise has got real fame. And it's true when you look at the likes of the Brad Pitts and the Chris Rocks and the Rock and all these different Arnold Schwarzenegger, they're really famous. That's real fame.
Yeah.
The stuff we have down here is just a few people recognise you on the way through and annoy the shit out of you when you go out, and you might have a drink when you go out. No, I actually don't drink. Milk and water is my drink of choice.
Yeah, actually, I do want to get to that. Well, by the way, I got you a drink if you want to. I got you a milk.
I'm actually, would you believe this? With my current fat guts, I need to stay off the milk. I love milk. It would be my favourite drink. If I wanted to, I could drink 4 and 5 litres a day easily. But I choose not to because it's not good for me.
Yeah, I went to see a nutritionist years ago, and she was like, well, you need to cut your coffee out. Milk is used to fatten babies.
Well, correct. And it's not only milk is used, we use another species milk than cows to feed us. I don't know that it's overly healthy, but I do love the stuff.
But that's one thing that struck me about you always. Like, if you're out at a bar with you, you'll have like a pint of milk. And it's like, you're probably the only person I know over the age of 8 that drinks milk as a recreational drink. It's a very bizarre sight. So a big unit you're sitting there with the milk.
We've actually, the late great Phil Kingsley Jones. I went to Wales with him, and we were searching for people to fight in one of our Fight for Lives one year. And Phil was a great guy, just an amazing character.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, Jonah Lomu's manager.
He was Jonah, but he was way more than just that. He was a personality in his own right, and he's a great speaker and had great jokes. But we went up to the valleys of Wales, and that's the coal mining area, and I've got to tell you, I've never seen so many rough, hardcore women in all my life, and they all knew and loved Phil and wanted a piece of his ass back then. But yes, and he could not believe I'd send him to the bar and he'd have to order pints of milk.
Yeah. So, why have you never been married, do you think? Are you sorry, just going back to that, are you better on your own, or you just never found the right person, or you're just busy focused on career stuff?
It's a really interesting... Have you been married?
Yeah, I'm still legally married to JJ, but we broke up about 5 years ago.
Yeah. Look, I've had some significant relationships, but haven't quite got round to doing the marrying thing. And, as you get older in life, I think you can reflect on a whole lot of things, and you go, you know what? Maybe I was the problem as opposed to them. So as you get on in life, you go, it's not... and look, I live in an amazing situation at the moment, which I can't believe I'm in, but I'm there, and I really enjoy it. It's very cool.
What is it? What's the situation?
I live with my... I live with my mum and my sister, and I absolutely love it. I'm telling you.
Right.
Because I've been transient for the last, or Liam and myself in particular, been transient for the last probably 5 or 6 years between here and Australia. I had an apartment over in Brisbane for quite some time, and then we moved sort of down to the Gold Coast, and we become a little bit transient. And one of the things I hate in life, I just hate it, is moving house. It is one of my
it is the worst.
It is one of my pet hates, and I've been a transient for 30, 40 years. So, how
old's your mum now? You're in your late 50s. What's she?
My mum's 77.
That's nice. And your dad's still alive as well?
Yeah, shit,
That's
your
nice.
dad's 79.
Cool.
They're both incredibly fit and healthy. Like all of mum's brothers and sisters, one brother died young, but they all lived to a ripe old age. The older sister got to 92, I think, And so I expect Mum's got a few more miles left on the tyres yet. And Dad's still, he lives on Waiheke Island, trains 3 times a week, and very, very
Unreal.
strong still.
Unreal.
And looks a lot like you, to be honest, fitness-wise. So, yeah, he does a lot of weight training and exercising in the gym, and he's been doing it for 20, 25 years. And Dad's committed no matter what happens to getting to 100. So, which is, it's a pretty good goal to have.
It's a great goal. So, wow, it seems like a weird dynamic living with your. So your sister's a similar age, in her 50s.
My sister is she's 4 years younger than me. She's 53, and my mother's. They brought a house together going back probably 20 years ago, and then they sold that house and they brought a really, really big house. So we live in a big house. It's like 3 stories high, and I sort of have commandeered the middle level. Mum has the bottom level, and my sister has the top level.
Okay, so you're not all 3 of you sitting on the sofa at night,
No. It's a big house.
Sitting there with your pint of milk.
I've got to get the situation sorted out. I can promise you that. I've got some land up in Taupaki that I need to get a house on at some stage. But
I just feel like you're not overly materialistic. Were you materialistic before you lost your fortune?
Man, that's a big understatement. I was very, very committed to when I was a young fella. Mate, I was going to be done and dusted by 30 or 40,
Retired.
Yeah, retired and doing nothing and made my millions. And, unfortunately, I've had ups and downs.
Yeah, you have. Now, I want to get into this. So you have your radio career, which is very successful. Then you get out of that.
We had a great time, but never made huge money out of it. Got paid okay, and enjoyed it immensely, but never you were rumoured at one stage to be on 300,000 plus a year, which is brilliant money.
Oh, yeah, a bit more than that, especially if you get the KPIs.
There you go. Which is, if you're doing radio and a 3-hour shift, and I know you probably prepped a lot more, and you turn.
Yeah, I took it way too seriously in hindsight.
You turn up at 4 and you go, then you're prepping afterwards. You got to do that if you're going to be paid the big money.
Yeah.
But you also got to enjoy it along the way. And I got to tell you, some of the people I got to work with, like. The absolute highlights, like Leah Panapa, she's still a great mate. We went out to lunch just recently. Nathan Raruri, I was very lucky to be on air with. Nathan's real strength on radio, and this is very rare.
Yeah.
His real strength was the same guy, turned up every single day, and was pleasant and was a nice guy. And he's just such a good guy to deal with. And you would know this, Dom, over the years. You want consistency, whereas, some people in radio, they come up, they might have different things that are happening in their lives and they're all over the place, which it happens because they're creative, talented people. And, mate, Nathan was amazing,
Yeah.
And we luckily got to talk with Ian Smith as well, who I think is one of the all-time great cricket commentators known anywhere in the world. His commentaries over the years have been nothing short of stunning, and I'm saddened to see he's not working with Sky anymore.
Yeah, now that show that you're talking about, that's when I got to meet you. So you lost all your money with the circus thing.
Yep.
So you got back into radio because you needed an income.
I've done some dumb shit.
No, we'll backtrack and we'll get into that. But when you were working with Nathan and Smithy, I remember this clearly. We were in the same building, and it was all the radio stations faced this internal courtyard. And you'd be, I don't know how many voice breaks you did on air, but you would wander around the courtyard on your phone all fucking morning. And then Nathan would tell me stories that I think you were contracted to work till 8:30 or 9 a.m. And he said 9 a.m. on the dot, you'd be in the middle of an interview or something. And Dino would just give him the thumbs up like, I'm going to go now. And then take the headphones off and sort of tiptoe out.
Well, that was more out of necessity. Like when I did about 7 years, I think, on Radio Hauraki, I think about 7 or maybe 8 years. I think it was radio. What was it called? Live Sport.
Talk Sport.
Live Sport. Yeah. And I got a call out of the blue from Brent Impey, and Brent had been instrumental in me getting the job on Radio Hauraki. Brent, as it turns out, he's a bastion of New Zealand broadcasting. Has been wonderful to me in all through my life, to be honest, my adult life, because he got me the job he was chairman of the board, or I think he was the CEO of the company when I got on Radio Hauraki. Then he was sort of really high up in the radio industry when I got given this job on Radio Live or Live Sport. And he also on a number of occasions put my Fight for Life on TV3, and I've had subsequent conversations with the rugby union about all sorts of things, and Brent's been a conduit to get me in there. So he's been very, very good to me.
He's
and
great.
I'm very, very appreciative of the support that I've always had from Bimpy. Unfortunately, he's retired. Well, fortunately, he's retired now. He's on a few boards, but he was certainly good to me in my broadcast.
Yeah, likewise as well, actually.
Yeah.
Great man. So, okay, so you leave Radio Hauraki. Is that when you start the Fight for Life? Is that when you bring the Fight for Life, like corporate boxing to New Zealand? Feels like it's such a big thing now, even the non-televised.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Like, I think around 2000,
Right.
maybe even just before 2000.
No, the first thing you did was the rugby league game with Canberra.
Oh, yeah. No, that's right. No, you did right. So when I left Radio Hauraki, no, I was at Radio Hauraki. I finished rugby league at probably 26, and I had played at the Canberra Raiders. I got a phone call out of the blue from Tim Sheen. Says, "Look, we'd love to bring the Canberra Raiders over to play in a local game." And I said, "Yeah, that'll be fine." So I did a joint venture with Radio Hauraki, who I was working with at the time. This was sort of the start of my entrepreneurial career. I'd only been out of rugby league for about a year, maybe less. And we put this game on, Auckland versus, this is way before the Warriors, this is like 1991. So we put this game on, Auckland versus the Canberra Raiders, and they were the hottest thing at the time.
Yeah,
You know, you had Mel Meninga, you had Laurie Daly, Bradley Clyde, you had at least 10 to 15 bloody people who played for Australia or New Zealand or state of origin. It was a big. So it was a big. And we sold the thing out and made it. We made a couple of $100,000, and I took 100, and Harrogate took 100. And I thought at the time, geez, this is better than playing footy. So that's what we concentrated on doing for the next sort of 2 or 3 years. And then I got tied up. Kevin Barry came up to me and said, "Look, I've got this really hot young heavyweight, David Tua. I don't know much about promotion. Do you want to help out?" So I helped him put on the first David Tua fight. And just things spiraled from there. And eventually we got to a thing called Fight for Life. And what had happened with that, a friend of mine who used to work, I think, in a Media Works, called Peter Spear, who's a sales rep in there. And he's a good mate of mine, and his house had burnt down and he had no insurance. So we put together a little fight night. I fought on it, Spiro fought on it, my mate Mark Bourneville fought on it, and we got a few mates together, and we raised some money for him to give him some money for his house, and we raised about $50,000. And mate, it was like walking on air. It was one of the greatest things I've ever done. It's like I don't. Drugs are not my go, but I can tell you, if drugs make you feel as good as this, you'd be on them all the time, because it was just a real highlight, and it was just to do something for a bloke. Anyway, one thing leads to another, and there's a place called Yellow Ribbon. Marko Marinkovic was at that event, I think, and he said, "Would you do that for us?" I said, "Yeah, sweet, but we'll try and raise you $1 million, and we've got to get it on TV, and we'll use rugby league players." He said, "Sweet." So he gave me full license to do what we did. That first year I did it for nothing. And we raised about $500,000, and we ended up with the #1 rating show on TV3, and it it spiraled from there.
Yeah, so is that how it started? So you were doing like league players fighting rugby players,
That
like a
was how
clash of the codes sort of thing.
Yeah, the clash of the codes, and we had some real legends. We had, for those of you who are old enough to remember, we had Mark Graham and Buck Shelford in there. I had Mark Bourneville, the horse who went on to become really amazing in Fight for Life, and Stevie McDowell. We had Mel Meninga fought with Kevin Borovich. So yeah, it was a big deal to us at the time, and it was a lot of fun to do it.
So when did you broaden it and get into other sort of mainstream celebrities?
Mainstream celebrities, that just sort of continued on for quite some time, and then we turned into more of an entertainment event.
Oh, is that when you had like dwarfs and?
Yeah, well, no, that was sort of the second iteration.
Right.
I used to bring in these really cool acts, like we'd have motorbikes doing backflips over the boxing ring, and we'd have guy, motorcycle foot juggling acts coming in. We had all these acts, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be a good idea if we took all these acts out of Fight for Life and put them into a circus? And that was probably the dumbest thing I ever did in my life.
But you're a risk taker, so you don't know it's a dumb thing until you got the benefit of hindsight. So you took a big bath on this one, the circus thing.
Yeah, we dropped in 1 year. I'd done a number of things that wasn't that smart. So one, I put the circus on, and I lost about $1 million on that. I'd sold off previously half my company to a couple of guys, and they were good guys, and I brought them out of the company, and I had some issues around tax. So I was about $1.8 million in debt, and I had no assets to back it, nothing. So
what happened to those houses we talked about?
Well, you sell things as you go, and you make mistakes, and you get separated, and you make sure people are looked after, all that sort of stuff. So I've made. If I could make some changes in my life, it'd be the slow accumulation of assets, right? I got mates of mine who had very long-term plans, and they've done very, very well just out of slow accumulation. So that's my advice to all you risk takers out there. It's fantastic throwing it all into one and, having a crack, but I suggest you just out the back end, just accumulate those assets slowly. But
So you mentioned Leo Malloy before, and I've had him on the podcast, and we talked about he ended up bankrupt for a time after he set up a bar called Cardiac.
yes, he did.
And he reflected in the podcast on his mistakes, and he said he sort of threw everything that he knew about hospitality out the window with this. Is that what happened to you? Do you think you got too big for your boots?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
you take
you've
your
got your
successes
golden
on
rules.
board. Look, we hadn't, when we're doing Fight for Life, so I was putting more and more money into the entertainment side of it, and there was bugger all net profit coming back. It was just bigger and better events, with bugger all net profit. And so we got to the end of it when we did this bloody massive circus, which lost a huge amount of money, and I got all the aspects of circus that you get right, I got them wrong. So the dumbest thing you can do, if you're ever going to put on a circus, the dumbest thing you can do is fly the best acts in from all around the world and only have them compete or do their stuff for a week, which is what we did in a fixed outlet. And the reason why it's dumb is, firstly, their prices through the roof, and then you've got all your accommodation expenses, you've got all the bloody airfares coming in to be amortised over no more than sort of 7 days. Smart circus acts, right? They have their own tents, they travel around the world or travel around the area, and you employ them for a long period of time. Their cost per day goes through the floor, so you don't have to sell as many tickets. Anyway, so I dropped $1 million on that. I was probably 1.8 in debt, and it took me 4 years to pay it off. There's no way I was going to go bankrupt, because I knew if I did that, I was going to be all over the front pages of the paper. So I called my creditors in and said, look, here's my problem. And I said to them, if you just hang tough with me, I'll get you paid. Then I turned around and I borrowed about $500,000. It was about $550K off 3 different people. They gave me that. So I managed to work out a whole lot of non-risky events, right, that I could run. There was no risk I was going to make money. So what we would do is I got the $500,000 in, I paid off as much of that, keeping everyone happy, and then I just went on this slow ride of sort of selling the events, paying them off, selling new events and paying off the old creditors.
And that's when you and I got to meet and sort of become friends, because you got back into radio for some
the radio
income.
thing came up because I desperately needed the cash.
Yeah.
So I was working, I was running a small business trying to make some money. I was working for an organisation trying to raise their money, and I was also working on radio. So I basically had 3 jobs. So when you saw me on the phone, it's because I'm desperately trying to pay off the bills. Mate, I can tell you this. I remember one day I'm on the North Shore, and, mate, I couldn't pay my fucking phone bill, and having your phone disconnected is you ain't doing nothing. So they were hard times, but, you have some good times along the way. I moved into a flat with a good mate of mine called Grant Churcher, who I just love eternally. And we're in this flat, or it was a house, another mate of mine owned it. It was a 3-bedroom house, and I was in 1 bedroom, and he had the main bedroom, which had the ensuite, and it was really nice. And it was a great victory to me when he moved out, and I could afford to move into the main bedroom for the simple fact, that was just a move forward,
right. Was that, like in hindsight looking back, was that period, would you say that's the lowest period of your life?
Man, it was stressful.
It's got to be. You can probably look back with enough hindsight now to get a clearer picture of things. But to go from being successful, being a successful league player, successful broadcaster, successful promoter, having all the money, all the assets and stuff, and then being down below zero, it's got to be fucking hard.
It was stressful.
Yeah,
I reckon I was depressed for a year.
Really? What did depression look like for you?
Depression for me. The only escape was sleep from the pressure. And for the first year, I knew that if I got it wrong, I was going to be all over the news and for doing this and doing that, and I'm a lowlife, when all you'd done is made mistakes and tried your best. So the first year was the hardest, right? And when you get to the end of the first year, all of a sudden you realise, I can actually do this, and I'm going to get out. But when you talk about pressure, the second you wake up, you're stressed and you're thinking about what's going to go wrong, and then you're anxious, right? And that feeling doesn't leave you, and it doesn't leave you until you go to sleep. It's like going to bed with a wet blanket. And when you go to sleep, it disappears, but when you wake up, it comes back, and it's just stress, and it's horrible. So 12 months was probably like that, and then it started to diminish after 12 months because you go, I can get out of this.
Why did it start to diminish? Were you just making headway?
Because you're making headway.
Yeah.
Every time you paid off a bill or paid some money off, it's another victory, and all of a sudden, all the new ideas you're forced to have, they're working, like you're never going to get rich off them, but you sure as hell are going to pay your debts. So at the end of 12 months, I've gone, right, this is a long, long tunnel, but I can see the light at the end, and it took another 3 years after that.
So do you see a therapist or anything in that time, or no?
I don't think so.
No.
I might have. And
I think I read an article somewhere you were reading like a lot of self-help books at the time.
Yeah. Like this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like so, it's a long time ago. We've had all sorts of successes and failures and challenges since then, but having someone you could talk to is essential because it's like a relieving of pressure.
Yeah. Who did you have? Was it like
look, I always had my mates.
Right.
They were great. Like Mark Bourneville and Mark Bedford and Mike Patton, mate Steve Cousins. They were fantastic. But you also need to have other people. I would recommend therapists. I'm not big on psychiatry, but certainly for some people that works for them. But a psychologist, someone you can go and have a release valve to.
Also, I suppose if you're 1.7 million in debt, spending 250 for an hour with a trained professional is
for
probably
a lot of people that's chump change. But for me at the time, that was a huge amount of money. So and it just took a long time to pay it back, which was pretty shitty. I wouldn't want to go through it again.
Why? I mean, it says a lot about your character, I think, like not just declaring bankruptcy. Why didn't you just do that? That would have been the easiest thing to do, right?
I guess my attitude is that if somebody supplies to you a good or a service, right, it's up to you to pay for it. Now, in that case, it just took a long time for some people to get their money. But they'd supplied me the goods and the services, so they have to be paid, And the alternative, is you end up on the front page of the paper and fucking all sorts of others. But I've heard people have said that they've gone bankrupt and the stress and pain goes instantly. It was just not an option for me, that was all.
Just a character thing. Just who you
I
are.
don't know if it's character, because it was just not an option.
Yeah.
Because everyone approaches these things differently. I've had friends who've gone through similar circumstances and they did things differently, and that's fine as well. And I think the most important thing you can do with people is just be upfront and tell them the truth.
Yeah, one thing I've sort of found over life is that the shit hits the fan for everyone at some point. Everyone goes through good times and bad times, and one thing you find is people that you think are really good friends, they either like lean in or lean out when that happens. And
I didn't have anyone lean out.
Yeah,
not by any stretch of the imagination. They more leaned in.
That's good.
Yeah, so you're lucky. I saw something by Tom Hanks was sitting down there that I saw on social media. Is a wonderful thing. But there's this little sort of 30-second, 1-minute clip where he was sitting with some really famous guys. Like might be Robert De Niro and Steven Spielberg and a few others. And he said, I wish someone had told me when I was a young fella, this too shall pass. And what he was talking about is that you will have hard times in your life. This too shall pass. You will have amazing highs in your life. This too shall pass. So I think the lesson is try not to get too stressed, because one way or another you're going to get out of it, and don't take it all too seriously.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And enjoy it.
You've had to learn these lessons the hard way, though. And where do you think this resilience comes from, or is it something that you've had to build by necessity over the years?
I have no idea. I don't know if it's resilience. It's just
it absolutely is.
You get faced with situations and you just got to overcome them, and it's really it's about, the key thing is just doing what's in front of you. Just tackle what's in front of you, and then tackle it again the next day and the next day. And in the perfect world, you'll get to a point where the challenges are overcome and you start to get to some gravy and have some fun.
You must be immensely proud of how you handled that whole situation, getting out of that hole, looking back.
Don't really think about it too much. No. Just glad
you learned some good lessons, though.
Yeah.
More
to be
circuses.
fair, just glad I did it the way we did it, as opposed to taking the option of not having to pay everyone.
Yeah.
I
think I read an article about you at the time, and you were talking about that flat situation with that guy Church you're talking about, and another guy called Mango.
Yes.
Mango, and what was the flat called? The flat of broken men, or something. What was it?
The House of Misunderstood Blokes.
House of Misunderstood Blokes.
I used to write a bit of a blog Yes, so I had two guys in the flat with me. One was called Church, which is obviously, and Church was we went to school together and played rugby together. And Church was and is an absolute rocket scientist. Like he was in 6 subject class at school. He used to do 5 subjects of school C, and I think he went to he could have gone to university. He got great marks, but he ended up driving a roller called the Space Shuttle. He called it the Challenger Space Shuttle, like those steamrollers. And he's just a great guy, and just a really good guy, an amazing flatmate. And I wish we were still living with the Church because he's such an amazing guy. But we used to have this other guy called Mango, and he was called Mango because he used to ride motorbikes really fast, and everybody would say, "Look at that man go." So Mango.
Oh God, what a time! God, it sounds like some sort of sitcom, doesn't it?
Well, I ended up at one stage, and I can't remember because all the dates, when you get older, they all meld into one. But I used to write this blog, and my mum encourages me to go back to writing a blog, and it used to be called The House of Misunderstood Blokes. And it was predominantly about the life of my mate Grant Churcher, who was the world's greatest drain layer. And we used to talk about his how he'd go on dates, and like I was chronicling his life. It was quite funny. But I've said to my mum, well, if I do this again, Mum, I'm going to have to write about you and my sister because that's who I'm living with. Yeah. What would we call it?
Did you fall back on alcohol or anything at any of these low points? How do you not? Because a lot of people would deal with the stress of a situation like this by.
I made a conscious decision going through it that if you drink alcohol, like I said, I had a really hard time for the first year. But if you drink alcohol, you're going to escape all your problems for 3, 4, 5, or 6 hours, right? And then the problem is when you wake up the next day,
even worse.
It's way worse. Yeah. And not only that, it's way worse for 3 or 4 days. So I sort of thought, right, I'll kick alcohol for touch and commit myself to doing what I've got to do. And at the back end of it, which was 4 years, I lost the taste for the alcohol. Hence, I don't drink anymore because I just don't like the taste of it. There's no great hidden meaning like I used to drink so much when I was a young fella, and I used to have a good time and used to go out and have plenty to drink, but that's not the reason I don't drink anymore. It's just I don't like the taste. If you could make alcohol taste like a strawberry milkshake, I'd be a drunk 24 hours a day. But as it turns out, you can't.
Oh, that's good. So you got through that period with a clear head and very, very dense bones from all the calcium you were having.
Probably, yeah. But I tell you what I do now, right,
What?
with the milk. I cut it in half. So
What do you
nowadays my drink of choice is half. I get the biggest glass I can get, half milk, half water, lots of ice.
Oh,
And
that sounds dreadful.
It's actually really good. And the key thing is to have it cold. But that way you can drink, you're not drinking as much of milk. Because milk's, I don't think it's overly healthy for you. And I'm sure Fonterra doesn't want me to say this.
Yeah.
But,
Jeez, you're an unusual guy. Was it around this time when you were living in the flat with these 2 other misunderstood blokes that you were eating? You had like a Nando's thing as well. You were eating Nando's every night of the week. Did I read that somewhere?
I don't think so.
You went through a Nando's phase.
You're making this up as I go. Did we?
There was a period where you had those espanadas.
Ah, yeah.
The chicken, the capsicum, and the onion, and the chicken.
I am a creature.
Nando's phase.
I am a creature of habit. Nando's is very good and very healthy. So
Do you think part of it is sort of like I don't know, like a Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg thing? You know how they wear the same clothes every day because it just takes a decision making out of their day. Like if you're eating Nando's every day,
you can't possibly put my name and those two in the same sentence. Jesus, but
no, but you know what I mean. It's like a decision every day. That's like
suddenly... man. It's because look, I go to the same cafe most times because I like going there because they have food that I like. I ate Nando's. If I ate Nando's every night for God knows how long, it's because I like the taste of it, as opposed to taking the decision-making process away.
Right.
Like I'm just not that complex.
I don't know, but I think you are smarter than what you give yourself credit for.
I sometimes wonder.
Yeah. What else was there? So, okay, so you get through that first year's difficult, and then you start to see a bit of headway, then you make more and more progress. I suppose it's like a snowball effect. Then how do you get back into the promotion game? Is this when you started Duco?
I was promoting all the way through, and
Right.
I was working on contract for a lot of people. I'd do anything to get the money in, and one of the contracts I got was with Duco, and you had a guy called David Higgins, who I don't have much of an opinion on, and John McRae were there, and they were putting together the David Tour versus Shane Cameron fight. They didn't have any experience at the time in boxing specifically, but they had a nose. They definitely had a nose for what made a good promotion. So I helped them put that together, and I charged them through the nose for it, and helped put them together, and it turned out to be very, very successful.
It was a phenomenal event. Yeah, the fight of the century. I had Shane Cameron on the podcast, and we talked
he
about...
is a good guy.
He's a great guy, and we talked about that fight in quite a bit of length, and he's got so many regrets. He said it took 7 years for him to get over that.
I bet it did.
7 years. 7 years before he realised, I haven't thought about that all day today.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
But that's what being in the boxing ring can do to people, because that was Shane's whole life was boxing, and he built himself up along with his manager Kenny Rainsfield, as you have to do to be the alpha male of the country. And all of a sudden there's another alpha male who realises you might be a great white shark, but this boy over here is a killer whale, and mate, he's the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Shane's made peace with it since then.
Yes, him and David are friends now. They've had a couple of tequila nights together, and
and I'm really sure they've got great things to say.
Do you feel? You probably don't. It's just business, but I mean, we talked about the interview that they did on a show called Close Up at 7 with Sainzo.
I remember it. Yeah,
and there was like. It wasn't quality trash talk. It wasn't Conor McGregor style.
No, it was.
But
it was high quality trash talk.
Do you think
so?
So?
Why? Because it was authentic, and it wasn't. And Shane was probably putting it on a bit, right? But Tua wasn't. Tua, I remember Shane and giving David a hard time, and it was just Shane doing the best he could from a trash talk point of view. He's a high quality human being and a great guy, but David Tua, he wasn't trash talking. He did something like he moved his neck around like that and made it crack, and he just looked, I think, at Shane and says, "I'm really going to hurt you."
And thank you for the opportunity.
That was about as authentic as it gets.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? And when David Tua had never said anything like that in his entire career. And Kenny Rainsfield, who's a good mate of mine, I've known for 30 years, was manager of Shane. He really got under David's skin, and he was doing things which, as a promoter, you look at it and go, "Thanks, Kenny, you just did a great job." And of course, that sold massively well, both at the venue down in Hamilton and on TV.
Yeah, Shane, in our podcast, he talks about regrets he's got, and he conducted himself in a way that's not him to his core.
Yeah.
Do you feel a little bit guilty about that? Because I feel like you guys made him.
Well, not
made
really,
him sort of hype the fight.
Because all you can do, right, at the end of the day, all these fighters make their own decisions as to what they do. And all you can do is provide the platform. And Kenny in particular, Kenny really he'd been a promoter himself, and Kenny Rainsfield, who was Shane's manager, understood the need for promotion. And Kenny was a genuine tough guy as well. He represented New Zealand in the Commonwealth Games. I think he went to the Olympics as a wrestler. And one of the great stories about Kenny Rainsfield is that going back 10 years ago, and he's going to hate that I tell the story, but Kenny could hold himself well and account when it come to a street fight, right? Because he'd had all his background in wrestling. But he got into a fight with a guy in Ponsonby Road who wasn't. It was less a fight and more an altercation, which the other guy should never have started. But Kenny did something I've never heard anyone do, and was the most painful thing of anything in anyone's life. He grabbed the guy by the hand, his thumb like that, and he snapped it down with a quick movement. So he broke the guy's thumb. And I've thought about that on many of occasions as, one, how do you think about doing that? And two, the pain and hurt that you are inflicting on someone is beyond thought.
It's like torture.
Oh, mate, that's like medieval shit, So Kenny was an interesting cat, and he's now chairman of the New Zealand Warriors.
Amazing.
There you go.
Amazing. So after the fight of the century, the Tour of the Cameron thing, that's when you Duco started working with Joseph Parker.
Yeah, They brought me into the company.
Right.
So at that stage, I owned half of it.
Okay, and you guys did a phenomenal job with Joseph Parker. Like, what?
Well, What? No, look.
What was that noise?
It's
No,
not.
no, all I can take it from is like I was on a top 40 radio station called The Edge, and we'd never have a boxer on.
Yeah.
But you guys presented us with Joe Parker. Well, I think we had him on as a favour for you because you're a nice guy and I like you.
Yeah.
And then he did a good job on the air, and so then that relationship was formed. So
Yeah.
you guys sort of made Joseph Parker like a
Well-
mainstream household name in a fringe sport.
All we did was provide the platform, and Joe took advantage of it. Don't forget, David Tua versus Lennox Lewis was the number one rating show of all time on television in New Zealand. So to say boxing was a fringe sport, I think is probably a bit of a stretch because, and I know it's not the All Blacks, right? But Tua went to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. His rise was well documented in the New Zealand media. Then Shane Cameron came along and he was there, and Joe was sort of the next alliteration of that, standing on their shoulders to some degree. So, but Joe definitely, all you do is provide the platform. It's up to the individual athlete to take advantage of it. Yeah, we hassled people and got them on where we had to get them on. And if they're no good, here's what my experience is this. Most of these guys, they start off not so good in the media. Some of them are born to it, right? But most of them aren't that good. But the more you throw them in, you can give them all the media training in the world. I'm not a big fan of it. The more you throw them in, the more you do it, the more comfortable they get, and you start to see the real person come out. And that's all we did with Joe, was just keep throwing them in. Joe's got a lovely personality, and he's a genuinely good guy. You know, so when that starts to come out, it's quite amazing that he boxes for a living, because deep down, to be a boxer, you've got to have some angry shit going on.
Yeah, he's not a savage, is he?
I think deep down he still loves to fight, and anybody who loves to fight, look, not everyone's going to be Conor McGregor, right?
Yeah.
But in all boxers, good or bad, but the really, really good ones, what Conor McGregor's got going on the outside, a lot of these boxers have got going on the inside. They just don't show it because, mate, it is not a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
These are the gladiators, the modern gladiators. There's only about 10,000, maybe 15,000 professional boxers in the world. And out of those 15,000, no more than 100 to 200 will make money out of it, and no more than 10 make the millions that you hear about. You know, so it's a very, very competitive sport, and it's very, very cutthroat.
Who got you on, just for the podcast, who got you on to Joe Parker? Who called you?
Was it Kevin Barry?
Judith Collins.
Was it? Yeah, I think it was. Liam's talking in the background. I'm pretty sure he's right. It was Judith Collins, who was Joe's auntie.
Oh, the old National Party leader.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, actually, you're right. She
Crusher
did.
Collins.
My memory is terrible, right?
Concussions.
Oh, I'm also of the opinion there's only so much your brain can hold.
Yeah.
And sometimes stuff comes in. If it's going to stay there, something's got to go out to wrangle around. No, you're right, Liam. Judith Collins did ring me about and tell me about him. And
So
then,
he wasn't on your radar at that point?
No.
No.
No. And look, this is a long time ago. Crikey, when did we first started promoting Joseph? 2010, maybe? That's like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
It just goes so fast.
What was that groaning noise you made before when I brought up Joseph Parker?
Duco is not a period in my
okay.
life that I want to talk too much about. I have zero respect for the bloke I was in business for. I think it's fairly well known why we separated.
I mean, it seems like it's sad in a way because you guys were incredibly successful together, and I hope maybe there will come a time, maybe there won't, where you can look back and reflect on that. But it seems sad, like Kevin Barry and David Tua. Like it's another very, very successful relationship that had a terrible split, and it seems sad in a way that you can't rescue anything from it at the end. You guys were successful, and I think you had the charisma of the operation, and I don't know, I'm guessing here. But you both brought different things to your partnership, but as a partnership, you and David were very successful. I can tell the way you're sitting here. Like,
I don't want to talk about it. One day I might serialise it, you know, and tell what really went on and why I separated. One day. And he himself for that one day when it comes. I can promise you that.
so there's no love lost, no relationship there now, no.
None. I once run into him in the Greyland RSA, and I ended up chasing him around a car. And unfortunately, I'm fat and overweight, and he's quite skinny. So it's like I'm like Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner, and I just wish I could have. But that's not for the podcast.
Well, I mean, like time heals a lot of wounds. So maybe there'll become a time where
No chance.
wow,
Not ever. Not ever.
you don't want to get into any of. I mean, I've heard some rumours over the years about what happened,
Well,
but
the rumours are probably true.
right. But I've got a saying in life, like you shouldn't believe everything you hear. Usually, where there's some smoke, there's some fire, but
Yeah,
not
and
always.
it's fair to say you shouldn't believe everything you hear.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay. So after Duco, I hope there comes a time where you can look back on that period, with some sort of pleasure because what you did was very, very successful. You deserve it.
We did some okay things, like
Yeah.
Joe, the rise of Joe Parker. That was a lot of fun, and seeing someone like Joe being successful. Also, the NRL Auckland Nines was, that was.
That's
hugely-
right. I forgot about the NRL Nines.
Yeah, that was very successful, and that was probably the most gratifying thing for me because we got to bring rugby league, to Auckland, and it was a real great celebration of rugby league, and the Auckland rugby league community got to come together, and we got NRL players out into the clubs, and it was really cool. That was very cool, being from a league background.
So then, post Duco, you go to Australia.
Yep.
How come? Why did you?
Well, when we had the split, I went with Jeff Horn, who
Australian fighter.
Australian
Yeah.
boxer, welterweight, and the zenith of Jeff Horn was to fight Manny Pacquiao at Suncorp Stadium, and he beat Manny. It was 51,000 people turned up for that event, and it's probably the signature event in boxing in Australia even to today.
Manny Pacquiao, a little Filipino, he used to be the president of the Philippines.
He ran for president.
Ran for president.
But Manny was one of the all-time great stars of the game, and he fought against a guy called
Mayweather.
Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
And I think Manny's end of that fight was about $100 million. Bob Arum's end was about $50 million, and Floyd's was probably about $150 million. So they made some serious money out of that.
So you were involved in negotiations for that fight?
Not for that fight,
Yeah.
but for the one in Brisbane that we did. Yeah, I did it from top to bottom. Did the
Right.
whole lot.
So you had dealings with Manny Pacquiao.
With Bob Arum.
Right.
Manny was a lot of fun.
Was he?
A lot of fun. When we did a bit of a
He didn't
media
eat dog
tour.
in Australia, did he?
No,
he eat dogs?
I don't. Manny was one of the most generous men.
Right.
And Manny Pacquiao did shit I've never seen in my life. So he comes over to do a promotional tour. No, he comes over for the fight. And I had to have $250,000 in cash, which was Manny money. And Manny money was given out to all of the cohorts that had come over. So he hired a private plane and brought about 100 to 150 people with him, who all stayed in the hotel.
Who? Like his entourage?
Yes, like all his friends. Manny Pacquiao, right?
So how many staff? How many staff and how many friends?
I honestly, I couldn't tell you. But I had to have that $250,000 ready for him when he got there, and that was handed out. He brought to that event. See, every fighter gets an allocation to the fight nights and how much, the tickets to give away. He brought $850,000 worth of tickets to that fight. I kid you not. And we had to give him $250,000 as he got off the plane. It was all deducted off the purse and stuff like that.
Right.
So Manny had this progression of Filipinos coming in from all around Australia, which he's handing out money and tickets to go to the fight and what have you. He's and generous, like. He'd be getting someone to shine his shoes at the airport and give him $100 US tip.
Wow.
Manny is the only boxer I've ever been out with who offers to pay for stuff, right? So we went out and had a dinner, and mate, it was a couple of grand, and there's a whole lot of people, and it was he's pulling money out of his pocket to pay. And I'm going, Manny, you don't have to do this, Like it was, but Manny formed a friendship with a very, very unique character called Jim Bannigan. Jim's a very good friend of mine. And I don't know how to describe Jim. He's an Australian agent, player manager. He's been a very good friend to me, a very good friend. But he is one unique individual. And Jim is the guy in life that you can equally hate and love at the same time, because he will really piss you off. I mean, piss you off with things you've never seen before. He was at the time quite an obese, overweight, white Australian male with great religious beliefs, and that's why he's a Catholic, and that's why him and Manny, because the Filipinos are very, very religious and very Catholic. So him and Manny struck it off. But we went on this bit of a tour, and Manny made the mistake of giving Jim a bit of lip. Now, Manny Pacquiao can give anyone lip in the world that he wants because he's Manny Pacquiao. So we're in this small bus going from place to place doing these promotional gigs. And Jim Bannigan turned around and looked at him and says, Manny Pacquiao, you can go and get fucked. Now, I promise you, in 25 years of Manny Pacquiao being who he is, he's never been told to get fucked in his entire life. Manny took one look at this fat, overweight, red-faced Australian telling him to get fucked and what the things he's going to do, and he just cracked up laughing and fell on the floor of the bus, and he's never laughed so hard in his life. So you meet some interesting characters, and interesting things happen along the way. But equally, that same guy, Jim, this is typical Jim Bannigan, right? So I had Jim doing the media on this Manny Pacquiao bloody tour, and I sent him into the Philippines, where Manny lived, with a whole lot of media, worked him quite hard, and Jimmy was under stress and pressure. So Jimmy had a stroke about 3 weeks before the fight. So I'm very concerned about Jim, because people die from strokes. So I go in to see him one day. I've made a few phone calls. I'm going to see him at the hospital one day, and he's got his whole family's around him. And he looks up at me and says, "This is your fucking fault." And I'm just going, Jimmy, you've just solved my problem about how I'm not going to hire you for the next fight, because that's just over the top.
Yeah.
But, you have your...
So those are some good yarns.
You meet some interesting people.
Yeah. So financially, how are you now? Have you done quite well out of Duco and in Australia the last few years?
Look,
why are you living with your mum and your sister?
I'm sort of in between places.
Right.
Now, look, we've done okay.
Yeah.
It hasn't been brilliant. We've done okay. I've got some land that I'm looking to develop up in Taupaki at the moment. But it's been, it hasn't, because of the entrepreneurial ride that you take, man. I've had ups and downs all over the place. And I've been
What's your relationship with money like now? Are you sort of neutral to it, or?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everyone would like to have a bit more of it. And I've been very, very lucky. I've had some amazing investors come along the way and wanted to be part of the journey. So I think the path going forward is going to be a lot smoother as a result. We get a lot of advice off different people. You'd like to be more successful than what you are, but at the end of the day, money is something that you should use to just help you get through life, and obviously you want to get ahead, right? But as you get older, it becomes less and less of a focus, and you want to be spending more time with family and friends, but you also want to have that success in your financial side to help you achieve that more and more,
But it seems like you don't have an ego at all.
I think you got to have an ego to get things done.
Yeah.
No, but
I suppose
ego.
I suppose like an ego, like when you went through that circus stuff, and then you were stripped back to bare basics, like not even in the biggest room in a house.
Yeah.
I suppose you learnt a lot about yourself then.
When you go through shitty times like that, your ego takes a bit of a hammering, and you're not quite as good as you thought you were, And but you look back at those times, and if I could look, I had really good times in there. It's just if you could do it without the stress and the pressure, The stress and pressure is one of the bitches of life, and along the way, I've worked out that I suffer from anxiety. Up until probably 5-6 years ago, I didn't realise that I did, but it's probably been a part of your life for a very, very long time.
What do you mean? What did that look like for you? Like panic attacks, or
no. Your gut's churning on a regular basis, worrying about how you're going to solve problems, overthinking things, thinking things over and over and over again. And it's only been the realisation that you do it, you go, oh, wow, okay, this is what I used to do some work for the Phobic Trust, and they used to do some stuff around anxiety. And at the time, I didn't know what it was really all about. But now I do. And it's only with realisation that you suffer from it, you go, oh, okay, now we've got to work out how do you deal with this. And I think that's been, one of my pet things in life is I don't want to go through anxiety. And I think a lot of people do, and it's a shitty place to be, because it's that feeling in your guts that you just work to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are times I think I can identify why I get it. When you can identify why you get it, then you can help yourself get rid of it. But everybody's different.
Why is it for you?
Oh, all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah.
It could be anything. It could be I don't know. Let's just say we're going to announce a fight night, and we haven't got a couple of guys signed up. You start thinking about it and go. But all the thinking in the world doesn't necessarily solve the problem if you're thinking the same shit over and over again.
Yeah, I saw a therapist a couple of years ago, and She asked me like about overthinking and doing that stuff, and she said when you catch yourself doing it, you just got to pause and ask yourself, is this helpful?
Yes.
And it never is. But it's easier said than done to then just throw it in the back of the filing.
It's taken me years to work it out, and it's taken me years to understand. I'm not sure I'm brilliant at getting rid of it, but it's taken me years to work out, okay, when I get into work and attack problems one by one, the anxiety disappears and you get on with it, right? But it's when you've got that thinking time. And the worst time, and I think this goes for everyone, is when you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. As you get older, and you're going to start suffering this, for whatever reason, older blokes get up at 2 or 3 in the morning to have a piss. I don't know why it is, but they do. And if you can't get back to sleep, that's when it's at its worst. You know, and I've talked to a lot of my mates about it, and they're all the same.
You know, it's funny you say that. That was legit going to be the next question I asked you. Like, how do you sleep at night?
Yeah, well,
amazing.
I get up, I go to bed early, right?
What's early? Like 9, 10?
Earlier, 8:30, 9.
Does your mum make you?
No. I quite like it. I'm in bed before my mum. That's truly tragic.
Hey, why? Are you just exhausted at the end of the day, or is it just an old routine?
I've always been to bed early, you know, and I always get up early. And if you get up early, you want to go to bed early. So, but I do watch a lot of Netflix. And I have seen The Big Bang Theory at least 5 times, maybe 6 every single episode.
But when you, I suppose a lot of your work, at least from an outsider's perspective, is being on the phone. Like, if you get up early, what are you doing for those hours when you can't ring people?
The first thing I do is go and have breakfast. That's always, and then you sort of start your day at 8:39 if you can, and then you're away. You know, and yeah. So I like to try and finish, like you try and do 9 to 5, but that's not how. Like, I get told all the time that I'm on the phone all the weekend, and you're all on the phone all sorts of different times. And one of the things as you get older, I think you try and be more present in what you're doing, rather than being on a phone call or being 100 miles away or thinking about something else. Try and be present in the moment, because that moment ain't coming back. You don't know if you're family or friends or whatever you're doing. Be in that moment, because that's important.
Yeah. And what's the rest of your life or career going to look like? You're never going to retire, are you? What are you now, 57?
57.
You'll be one of these people that keeps working, won't you?
Man,
you have to.
I would rather not.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
What would you do? What would retirement look like?
Retirement would look different to what I do now, right? But you know, I would like to build my Airbnb up in Taupaki, and have people from around the world come and stay there, and then 6 months of the year go off and do what you got to do, you know, whether it be Gold Coast, whether it be going to the States, whether it be going to England, hanging out with friends and family. In particular, we've got Liam over here. You know, we used to do a lot of travelling. I'd like to get back to that. But at the moment, we've just finished up in Australia. We've got to rebuild our business back here, and mate, there's another, fight to be had, literally and figuratively, and we're slowly getting there, So, yeah.
Is your relationship with your son one of the things you'd say you're most proud of in your life?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the number one priority.
I mean, he's been sitting here, he's a grown-ass man, but he's been sitting here watching this whole interview, and I think that says a lot about you as a person, and a lot about the relationship that you guys have together.
Liam listens to more podcasts than any man I know, so it would be remiss of me not to bring him down to see how they're made, even though he's seen hundreds of them.
Yeah, but it's a podcast, but it's still listening to your old man talk shit for an hour and a quarter.
Well, there's nothing I've said that he hasn't heard before.
Yeah, right. Well, that's cool. Well, you've always had a real close relationship with him. As I said, you used to come on my radio show and give him a shout out. That was the first thing you did, and the fact that you're in business together now and still incredibly close, I think that says a lot. Not every father and son relationship is like that.
No, they're not. And I'm sure I drive him mental quite often, and I'm sure there's a number of times when he wants to headbutt me. And to be fair, he would probably be quite right in doing so. Like, Liam's managed to see things in our business that I haven't seen, and he's given me advice at times that I haven't taken. And I need to listen closer, because he's got some great ideas, and he understands the macro part of our business, So there's a lot of things we do now because of his suggestions.
Yeah, also, I suppose young ideas, fresh ideas, different perspective.
Oh, big time. And he really, really understands this game, because, mate, he watches and loves the fights that we do, and he loves UFC, and he understands media, so, it's a pretty good ground.
Yeah.
And he's been around it all his life. Christ, I got photographs of Liam when he was 5 or 6 when I'm fighting, and he's in the corner with a sign that says "Go Dad." That's pretty cool.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
And what about you personally? Do you hope to find the one? Do you believe in soulmates?
I'm not holding my breath. I've managed to get to 57 years and haven't quite, got there yet. So
Yeah, I was talking to. I just turned 50 the other week, and I've got a mate who's a similar age, and he broke up with
How
his.
long you been single for now?
4 or 5 years. Oh, I've been seeing a lady for the past year.
Right.
But me and JJ, we broke up about 5 years ago.
Is that your first marriage?
Yeah. And I've got a mate that broke up with his wife a similar time, and he said the thing that he's worried about is like getting like set in his ways now, because he quite enjoys being single now.
Yeah.
And just being able to do as he pleases when he pleases. But you're a great guy, and you've got a lot to offer someone. And I feel like you've learned a lot about yourself as you've evolved.
It sounds like you might want to give me one, Dom.
Yeah, give you one, like metaphorically speaking, or
Who knows?
no, but like, are you on any apps or anything, or no?
No.
So you'd want to meet someone organically, like at the
gotta
bar,
be honest,
shatter a pint of
I
milk.
don't think about it too often.
Yeah.
Like if these things, if they happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And you just get on. And at the moment, I got other priorities. And the priority is we're coming back into New Zealand. We've got to reestablish ourselves back here. We've got a whole lot of good ideas, and we just got to bed them in and get them done. And most importantly, we've got some fighters signed to us who are very, very good at what they do, and they deserve to have a platform. These guys are seriously, seriously talented. So we've just got to provide the platform for them to do what they do best.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you back in New Zealand.
It's good to be here, man. I got to tell you, like when you're overseas, Australia's a very, very tough place to do business.
Is it if you're a Kiwi or for anyone?
Oh, for anyone. Like a lot of people would say, it's one of the hardest markets. Between that and China, it's the hardest markets in the world to crack. And it's nice being home with family and friends and what have you. You can go and see on a regular basis. You run into people in the street and stuff, which is because you haven't lived there all your life. It doesn't happen in Australia.
Yeah. And I mean, back here, you run into your mum and your sister every time you go home.
And how good is that? How good is that?
Yeah, that's going to.
I've got to tell you this, man. When I was 21, the last thing I would have thought I'd be doing is saying I love living with my mum and my sister, but I do, and I tell you what else I love doing. I love going down to Waiheke on the weekends and living and staying at my dad's place at Rocky Bay. So little things in life, man.
It's cool. You're quite family orientated, eh?
As you get older, you realise how important it is.
Yeah, but often as you get older, you realise how important it is. But it's like if you didn't have the relationship with your son all the way through, and you decide now it's important.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you need to do the work all the way through.
Yeah, I'm talking about extended family. Okay. But even extended family, when we were young, we used to all go to Waiheke Island for Christmas, and you'd be there for 6 weeks, and you had 6 or different 8 branches of the family there, and you'd hang out together on a regular basis, and you don't realise, you just think it's normal, right? You don't realise how special that is until you get older, and other people don't get to do that sort of stuff. My mum and dad, they built their first house in Massey. They brought a section and built a house, or built a batch down at Waiheke, and we've had this lifelong affiliation with Waiheke and Rocky Bay, which goes right back to my grandparents who in the 30s built a place at Rocky Bay. And back then, they have to do like a 1.5 hour trip on a tram or a bus to get to the downtown. Then the ferry was another sort of 2 hours. And they used to catch a milk cart from the Rocky Bay store up to their place, so it was 5 or 6 hours to get down there. And they had 6 kids in tow. So it's amazing how times change,
Jeez, that would have been your dream, being on the milk truck.
Yeah,
get to the destination. I don't know where all the milk's gone.
Would you believe this? Sections back then, when I was maybe 22, 23, I had the opportunity to buy sections for $5,000 a section. Those same sections are $500,000 now. It's quite amazing with the passing of time,
But you got no regrets about your financial decisions or anything?
Financial decisions, of course.
Yeah.
Because if you could change 3 or 4 fundamental decisions along the way, life would be a lot easier. But at the end of the day, you can't change it, so you can't think too much about it. The best thing you can do, I think, is learn from your mistakes. Unfortunately, wise people learn from other people's mistakes. I have to learn from my own. So, hopefully we've learned all the mistakes we've made, and we can implement and go well.
But I feel like you're living with your mum and your sister by choice, though. It's not like a financial decision.
No,
right?
to be bluntly honest, To be bluntly honest, if I wanted to live elsewhere, I probably could. For Christ's sake, don't tell them that. They can't see this podcast.
Hey, mate, it's been wonderful sitting down with you today. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time and your stories.
It's all right, brother. And it's wonderful to be here, and it's great to see you're out having a crack by yourself. And fingers crossed you get up to a couple of 100,000 listeners a show, and you can sell it off for millions of dollars, just like Joe Rogan did.
It's fucking terrifying doing something on your own. I mean, this is new to me, but you've been doing it for decades now.
But see, what's really interesting for you is this is not new to you. You've been doing this exact thing for 30 years. This is just an extension of what you've done. The only thing you're doing differently is you don't have the guaranteed income, and you've got to get out and sell it yourself. And all those sales reps in those years gone by that used to curse and swear for having you to read shit and endorse stuff you didn't want to endorse, you're going, they actually might have been good blokes because they helped pay my wages.
Yeah, they used to say things like, oh, I pay your wages. And I'll be like, fuck off, without the ratings I deliver, you've got nothing to sell.
Exactly.
But I do understand it now, yeah.
Well, and the thing, yeah. And maybe
eating a bag of shit.
Yeah. And look, Dom, I'm sure you're going to end up doing this. You'll be the biggest podcaster in the country very, very quickly. You've only done, 56, 57 eps?
Yeah, just a year.
That's incredible, man. What are you doing, one a week?
Yeah, one per week.
I think Joe Rogan does 3 a week.
3 per week. I'd love to build up to that level.
Yeah, 1 a week's solid.
Yeah, so mate, it's the thing's been set. He's done something like 1,935 eps or something, because I've become quite a follower of him. He's really impressive.
Oh, it's incredible. And you look back to the early stuff, like he was doing this 10 years ago. So he's like an overnight sensation that spent years and years grafting away.
And he probably did it just because he loved doing it.
100%. Yeah, there was no financial reward in the first however many years.
Which is, I guess, why you're doing this is, of course you want financial recompense, but you actually like doing what you do.
Yeah.
And you're good at it. And some of the interviews you've done, like Mike King, I thought was outstanding.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, there's been some really, really good ones, and it's getting easier and easier to get good people on. The issue that I have to get over is I've always associated success with money.
Right.
And I need to somehow split those two apart and realise that they're not always hand in hand. So I've had more feedback about this podcast I'm doing than what I had in the last few years of radio. So it's like, I know I'm onto a good thing.
That's because when you're doing short form radio, like you have, a 3-minute talk break?
Yeah.
There's not much you can do. It's like short hits, try and be funny, get in and get out. And you don't really get to talk in depth like we're doing now. Oh,
100%. Like if we had you in for a chat, it would be get Dean in, talk about how he drinks milk, get you to scull a pint, and then send you on your way.
Yeah, pretty much.
We wouldn't get to dig through the surface and find out that you're living with your fucking mum.
What's really fascinating, right, is that what's really fascinating with social media, it's all about short clips, 15, 30 seconds. If you want to get cut through, get in and get out. But Joe Rogan has shown that long form media has got a real place, and that's what you're starting to get into, which is totally opposite to what you've done all your life.
Yeah,
which is pretty interesting.
And it's enjoyable too. It's enjoyable, and I can't thank you enough for coming and being so generous with your time today. Great to have you back in New Zealand, and those boxes that you mentioned at the beginning, I look forward to hearing more about them.
Nia Motu, Andre Mikhailovich, Jerome Pampalone, and of course Jai Abataya, who's the current IBF Cruiserweight Champion of the world. They're all very, very special in their own way, and they can really fight. And look out for them on the way through, because they're about to do some cool stuff.
Jai Abataya sounds like a made-up name. It's too good to be true.
He actually, the Opatayas, I think, come from West Auckland originally.
Oh, that's so.
He's been over there for a couple of generations, but he's something very, very special.
All right, and so are you, Dean Lonergan. Thanks for your time.
You're a good man.